In this episode, it was a huge pleasure to discuss with Derren Nisbet, the CEO of Virtuoso, many aspects of sales, sales leadership, and the perspectives of the CEO. Derren brings huge experience to the podcast, having worked with industry-leading companies such as BEA Systems, Oracle, GT Nexus, OpenText, Cooper Software, and now with Virtuoso QA, the leading codeless testing automation experts. Our discussion is wide-ranging with lots of highlights, and Derren has forthright views on many aspects of complex B2B sales and sales leadership. Many points resonated, and for me particularly, it was his insistence that every sales leader and every role is unique, so that while we can learn from others, everyone has to develop their own authentic approach. Personally, I especially love the phrase "from salesman to statesman" and his advice to be brilliant at something. But there's something for all new as well as, I think, all experienced sales leaders in this episode. Enjoy. So Derren, thanks ever so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to this session to get your insights, your perspectives. We'll start by talking about sales management, sales leadership in general, if you're okay with that. And one thing I'd really like to touch on is kind of your perspective moving from, being a sales manager, senior sales leader to a CEO role. So we might want to look at the different perspectives there.
Okay.
But if we could I have a standard question to start with, which is, can you just explain your journey into leadership? How did it work for you?
I was a sales guy, obviously. I think
okay.
people move from sales into sales leadership.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a sales leader. I passionately wanted to be a sales leader.
Okay. Why was that?
It's difficult to explain, really, Steve. I think it's probably within me. I just wanted... it wasn't about an ambition necessarily to be a leader. It was about a passion to be a leader, I think. That's probably a good way to describe it. Not ambition, it's passion. And I think growing up, playing sport and being captain of the rugby team and captain of the football team, etc., and enjoyed that aspect of influencing others and working with others. So I think that kind of played through into my career.
Right. And so one of my questions is always, what, in your opinion, are the kind of the key attributes that you need to move into sales management? And would you say that passion is one of those, or how would you position that?
I've seen good sales managers without a lot of passion.
Okay.
I think if there was a cookie cutter approach to what makes a good first line sales leader, we'd all use it, right? But I don't. I think people are different. Yeah. I think you can be different. I think that's an important lesson. You can be yourself as a sales manager,
right?
And there are different qualities that you have that will play through.
Okay.
So there's no one size fits all from a leader, from a sales manager, whichever way you want to put it.
Yeah. Okay. So you had this passion. You're a sales guy, I presume reasonably successful, but you had this passion to get into some kind of management leadership role. And how did that play out?
I was lucky at the time that I worked for Oracle.
Okay.
And at Oracle, a big company with lots of opportunities. There's different business units, different areas.
Yeah.
And also good development areas for people as well.
Right.
So the first thing that I tell people, if you want to be a sales manager, is you've got to say you want to be a sales manager, right?
Right.
Don't keep it a secret.
Okay.
And it might take a little bit longer than you think. It will, or it should. But if you set yourself out, and this is the same from a career perspective, wherever you are, whatever you want to do, you set out your stall. You said, this is what I want to do.
Right.
And I did that at Oracle, and I applied for a sales management role, and I didn't get it.
Hey.
Which was disappointing.
Yeah.
I applied for another sales manager's role, and I didn't get that.
Hey.
Incredibly disappointing.
Yeah.
And then third time lucky. And this was probably over the course of maybe more than 12 months.
Okay.
But what I was able to do was ask people why I wasn't suitable.
Right.
What I needed to develop. What they thought the gaps were. And then address those, and then get to a place where it's almost very difficult for people not to give you that role, right? Unless they've been lying to you and there's huge gap that they've not told you about.
Right. Okay, but presumably that meant that you could prepare yourself to quite a good extent. You're getting feedback from interviews. I mean, Oracle, as you say, good development opportunities. Were you able to get some training and stuff like that before moving into management? Excellent.
You had to complete a specific course, I think, before you could be a manager.
Okay, yeah.
And one management development course. So you could go on, I've done all the courses.
Right.
And that's it's intent, right? I think the good thing is you are showing your ambition.
Yeah.
You're showing what you want to do. You're investing time, your own time to develop and try and get to where you want to be from a career perspective. And regardless of where you are, I think that's important. I think it's important for people to show that.
But your experience is different from many of the sales leaders I interview, because many people just kind of get dropped into it. An opportunity arises, their name was put forward, and they suddenly find themselves thrust into sales management. But you were preparing yourself, you were training, you were getting feedback. Yeah.
Believe them, Steve?
I maybe not in all cases, but often, and I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
But would you say that was, what are the advantages of, you're delaying moving into management for 12 months or so, you're putting yourself through all this training. Does it really prepare you? What was it like when you actually moved into the role? Were the things that, you hadn't prepared for that surprised you?
It doesn't prepare you. It makes you a little bit more resilient.
Okay.
It makes you a bit more thick-skinned. Makes you perhaps a little bit more determined. But I don't believe I learned anything in that 12 months or so that made me better suited to the role. And I still made all the mistakes that in the book as soon as I became a sales manager.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of us do that to a certain extent, but so one of the recurring themes that I come across when we talk about this topic is, for many people, the first 6, 12, 18 months are really difficult emotionally, transitioning from an individual contributor to a management role where you have different pressures, different responsibilities. You had prepared yourself somewhat, but how was that transition for you? Did it go fairly quickly? What happened?
I don't think I had a difficult 12 months. I don't think it was difficult at all. I think it was thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think I was probably lucky and I was able to pull a team together.
Okay.
And hire people myself.
Okay.
That obviously, I was vested in those people that weren't necessarily all given to me. There was a couple of people already there that I worked with. But it wasn't. I didn't find it difficult. I made mistakes. I got things wrong, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt like I'd arrived at where I should be when I was a manager. And it's more enjoyable than being an individual contributor for me.
Right. And what's the enjoyment that you get out of it, Derren? You got out of it then, and I mean, maybe it's the same things that you get out of it today, but what are the enjoyable aspects of managing people?
It's being successful as a team, being
Okay.
successful through other people and with
Okay.
other people.
Yeah.
My first ever sales job, straight out of university, the sales director had something called the Blues, and the Blues was a chart that he produced every week,
Okay.
and it was a blue piece of paper. It was in the days when you got memos, Steve. This wasn't emailed to
I
you.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody over target was in capitals, and if you
Right.
top,
Yeah.
and it went all the way down, and the people's names got smaller. If you weren't over 100%, you were not in capitals. And this
Right.
went to the whole company, right? So
Okay.
everyone saw where you were as an individual contributor.
Right.
So it drove people to want to be in capitals, right? They didn't want to be the bottom of the Blues, right?
Right. Right.
But that's an individual thing, right? But you can. I think the great thing about being a sales leader, if you're managing multiple people, you can see multiple people develop, multiple people become successful. Some people have life-changing events, right, to the sales that they achieve,
Yeah.
and go on to do other things. And unless you are just entirely coin operated and just want to make as much money as possible, there's real enjoyment in being a leader in that environment.
Yes. Yeah. When you say life-changing events, you're clearly not saying just because you got a big commission check.
Yeah, like commission checks that change their lives, right?
Right. Okay.
Pay off
Okay.
their mortgage and
Right.
huge commission checks, right? This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like life changing for some people. That's special if you're part of that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. But as you say, as a manager, you're responsible for other people and for their success. And most people, I don't know if it was your experience, Derren, but most people moving into management probably don't actually take home as much money over the first couple of years as they would have done if they were a very successful individual contributor. So there must be other. It's not just the money. You as a manager, you're not just, as you said, coin operated. It's getting that joy from seeing other people.
And as an individual contributor, you're trying to influence prospects and customers.
Yeah.
So you're trying to influence people outside and alliance partners or whatever, right? People outside of your organization.
Yeah.
When you become a sales leader, you're trying to influence people internally. You're trying to influence friends.
Yeah.
You're trying to help people. It's a slightly different dynamic. Because ultimately these are people you care. If you care, you should care. You care about these people. These are your team.
Yes.
You want them to be successful. You want to look out for them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a thoroughly enjoyable thing. It's very rare, I think, that you do a sales deal and you walk away thinking, man, I've helped Steve so much. Steve's going to sleep better at night. He's going to be really successful. Very rare that happens, right?
Right.
But you
Yes.
can get that from leading individuals within your organization.
Yeah. 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 And that joy you get as you see people being successful, growing,
Yeah.
helping them with their life. Can I just come back to the blues? This blue sheet, because this fascinates me, and there is big debates about this. Now we don't send. I don't know. I don't think people send out physical pieces of paper, blue pieces of paper. But some people do similar things. They'll send an email once a week with the leaderboard on it. But some people frown upon that kind of behaviour. what's your take on making all that very public? The results that your individuals have.
Well, some places you can't, right? So you're not allowed to do that in Germany. When I talk about mistakes I make, right? There's an interesting mistake I've probably made in the past. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I think honesty is really important, and being upfront. We might talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah.
Incredibly important. And if you aren't in a great place because your numbers aren't great, then why wouldn't you and everybody else know about that? It can be a great motivator in lots of ways.
Yeah.
And if it's demotivating, then you probably aren't leading appropriately.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
So, Steve, if you're bottom of the blues, right?
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for me to sit down with you and say, hey, Steve, how do we get you up this chart, right?
Right.
What is it we need to do?
Yeah.
And I talk about the Gartner Magic Quadrant for salespeople, right?
Okay.
When you look at the axes, right?
Yeah.
And one axis is performance.
Yeah.
And the other axis is behaviors.
Yeah.
So top right-hand corner, you're smashing your numbers and your behaviors are great. You're really collaborative, your CRM margin's great.
Yeah.
You follow sales process, etc. And you're a good person. Top right.
Yeah.
If you aren't selling, but your behaviors are great, you're bottom right.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, hey, you just got to keep going.
Yeah.
Right? Because if everything we embody and everything we teach you and everything that we're working towards, you're doing it all, it will come good. And if it doesn't come good, then we've got something wrong, right? Not you.
Right.
If your behaviors aren't good and your numbers aren't good, then you're probably not in a good place, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that you can absolutely affect is your behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? Your numbers might take a tumble every now and again or might be difficult.
Yeah.
But that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So back to the point of the question is, you ought to be able to motivate people through that, right? You're not where we want you to be. Where we want to be. How do we get there? What do you need? What can I give you? What can somebody else give you?
Yeah. Excellent. So, one of the things I did before getting on this episode, Derren, is I looked through on your LinkedIn some of your recommendations. And one of the things that struck me is a couple of people, actually 2 or 3 people, point out that you can be very challenging, but that you're also very supportive. And that seems to have come through in what you've just said there about how you deal with people, do that matrix performance and behaviors. And we all know, you listen to football managers, they talk about the result and they talk about the performance. Did we perform well and did we get the result or not? It's I think a similar thing. We can control the behaviors. Behavior is skills and knowledge, but it's also attitude. So what do you do if somebody seems to have those right behaviors? They've got the skills, but there's something amiss with their attitude. How do you approach that?
You've got to address it directly.
Right. Yeah.
It's important to understand what's going on in people's lives, right? And what's their ambitions and what do they want to do and what do they want to achieve. I think the very first thing you should do as a leader in any way, any area, sales or other, is to get to know the people that you will work with.
Yeah.
So what makes them tick? What are they looking for? What are their challenges? What's important to them? What are their ambitions, desires, etc.?
Yeah.
And if it's an attitudinal problem, that's a kind of broad thing, right? They're not kind of working hard enough they're not going to work hard enough. They don't want to come into the office. They want to work from home all the time. That's all fine. There's probably a limit to where they'll get to. And you can be honest, right?
Yeah.
If you want to work 4 days a week, you probably achieve whatever you achieve, right?
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
want to work 5,
Yeah.
you might achieve more. But that's up to you. I can't make you, do some of these things. But then it depends what you mean by attitude, Steve. I have this phrase which is no brilliant jerks. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Let me write that down. Yeah.
Doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah.
If you're a jerk, then I don't want you in the team.
Right.
Right? It's kind of that bad apple in the team, right? That affects everybody else.
Yes.
I don't want that.
Right. Okay. But it strikes me, Derren, that, I mean, you obviously have high expectations of people. You're very committed to helping them to succeed. The jerks, the people who have a bad attitude, don't have the right behaviours, aren't performing, that's kind of one set of people. Where a lot of new sales managers seem to struggle is what I call the 80%ers. So the people who are doing enough, they're bringing in some business, their accounts are fairly happy with them, but they're failing to meet target. They're not reaching your expectation, but it's not bad enough that you'd say they're a jerk and we should, go down a different avenue. How do you deal with those people in your experience?
It's a really good question. It's a really difficult one to kind of give a direct answer to.
Right.
I think very early in my career as a sales guy, I had a sales director at the time. He said to me, "You can't have a team of superstars.
Right.
It never works, right?"
Yeah.
Some people would probably argue that that's not necessarily the case, right? Some of the most successful organizations have had dream hiring. Yeah, I think about my time with Parametric Technology, right? They hired a team of people who were just, you were either on it or you were out.
Right.
Maybe you can, but I would say the former, right? You can't have a team of absolute superstars everywhere. So there are some that will do less than optimum.
Right.
You find out whether they're ever got the ambition, the desire, the attitude, and the application, and to be able to step up.
Yes.
And do more. And it might be that they can, and if they can't, and they're not coming up to scratch, then you've got to work with data in that regard. Right. You've got to say that, minimum attainment ought to be X.
Okay.
How do we get you to X, right? If X is 70%, how do we get you to 70%? Have you got enough pipeline? Have you got opportunities? Like I said earlier, are you following the processes that we put in place? Are your behaviors correct? Correct. We're not quite getting there. There's some coaching you need. But a lot of the times those people you can coax into being more successful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's, again, in my experience, as you said, it's a very difficult situation. And going back to what you said at the beginning, there's probably no one size fits all. You have to treat people as individuals. Okay. So, as you develop your career, so you were very driven to get that first sales management role. Sounds like your first team was a new team that you could put together, which again is slightly unusual. Those sales managers, certainly that I've come across, often start managing their existing team, or they go to a team that's in place. It must have been very difficult, to make that move into management and to have a brand new team. You're going to go out and hire people. Is that in hindsight, is that the best introduction to sales management, or would you have preferred something maybe easier?
I would say that probably every journey gives you a different perspective, right? Whichever way you enter it. Okay. And what it's given me is absolute clarity on the fact that if you have headcount for 10, you need to find 10 people, right?
Okay.
And it amazes me how many sales leaders don't do that, right? So at Oracle, I think if I remember correctly, I had a budget of 6 million.
Yeah.
The salespeople would carry a target of 1 million, and I had 2 salespeople. So I said to my new boss, well, I've only got 2 million carried,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you better hire the other people then, right? So I had to get out and hire people I felt I could make successful quickly to get me to that 6 million. And I've always had it stuck with me all the way through my career, right? We've got to get ahead of hiring. We've got to understand, making people, ramping people quickly, making them productive quickly.
Yeah.
What happens if we hit any attrition? And often I have literally, Steve, interviewed vice presidents, right?
Yeah.
And said, I don't see how you're going to get your number. You haven't got enough people to hit budget. And they've kind of scratched their head and suddenly realized it. And I'm like, what? It's the very first lesson I learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, particularly for a new, I mean, I think it's a very challenging situation for any manager, but for a new sales manager, you need to hire at least 4 people, probably more, because as you say, the ramp period.
Yeah.
So there's a huge temptation to just go out and hire anybody, just some warm bodies, which, most people would then find that they're going to regret some of those decisions. How did you approach that, Derren? It's a very difficult situation to be in.
Well, it's my first managerial role, right? So I probably gave it a lot of focus because it was really important.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also been at Parametric Technology where we were hiring people pretty rapidly and pretty consistently, and I knew that the process that they put people through was very challenging.
Okay.
I was kind of accustomed to that challenging interview process.
Yeah.
And I put that in place myself.
Right.
Make sure we were hiring the right people. And if you hire someone, you've got to make them successful, right? You've got to, I think my favorite sales leader is John McMahon, right? And the qualified sales leader, he talks about, you've got to look yourself in the mirror. If someone you hire isn't working out, because either you hired the wrong person or you didn't give them the platform to enable them to be successful.
Yeah. And again, particularly for a new manager, those are very difficult discussions to have with the individual, but as you say, to have with yourself, to think, okay, I got this wrong, because there's pride involved and an ego, and most people, will take too long to come to that realization and then do something about it. And as a new manager, if you've got half a dozen people to hire, you probably are going to make 1 or 2 mistakes. But again, that balance between getting people on board quickly, getting them up to speed quickly, making sure that they are performing, that's incredibly difficult. Yeah. Do you employ any tools, techniques, kind of mantras for yourself in that whole process?
I'm not sure it is that difficult, right? I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's important. But if you are a first-line sales manager and you're not doing that, you're not giving that everything you've got, you're probably focusing on the wrong things, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And if you join a company as a salesperson, what you want is a lot of support from your sales manager. You don't want your sales manager wanting to dive onto every call that you make, but you want them to be coaching you along and helping you and assisting you and making sure you've got everything you need to be successful.
Right.
I don't think it's difficult. I think that's the job. That's what the job is.
Yeah. But certainly, Yeah, a lot of new sales managers tell me that they find it difficult to do that. Maybe they're not getting the support from their organization. They've never had any training or coaching, but it's something. It sounds like a lot of this stuff came to you very naturally. You're in a good supportive environment. You'd had some training. You've clearly got, captain of rugby, captain of football. You've clearly got some natural leadership skills. And it seems to have come very natural to you.
The best sales leaders have empathy.
Okay, yeah.
Without question. I said at the start that there are sales leaders who are just dictatorial and will hire people and they'll do okay in certain environments, right? They'll just hire people and say, get on with your job.
Yeah.
And that guy's failing. Not really, it was a bad hire. We should have hired somebody else, get rid of them, hire somebody else, right?
Yeah.
There are, the industry is littered with those people.
Yeah.
I think the ones that become successful over a consistent period of time have empathy and an ability to push and pull when needed, to be a little bit directive when you need to be directive.
Yes.
But at the same time, have empathy when people need empathy and support when people need support. And that's when it clicks. When you get those different areas, talked a little bit about, you mentioned football earlier, right?
Yeah.
The best football managers or coaches, for my sins, I'm a Manchester United fan, right? We talk about Alex Ferguson.
Okay.
Everybody talks about the hairdryer treatment, right? Yeah. So he will tell them when they're not performing whatever, or doing things wrong, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are so many stories about him driving around to people's houses, putting his arm around someone, helping them through difficult times and periods.
Yeah.
There's that balance, right? There's a balance between them respecting you and also following you, right? Leadership is about getting people to follow you.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's that balance between they need to be following you for all the right reasons, right? And that's because they respect you and they want to do well for you.
Yeah. That word, the word empathy often comes up. The word respect, for me, respect is something that you have to earn. Yeah, and it's in other people's eyes. You can't say, I've decided I want to be respected. But what do you actually do as a leader, as a first line manager, to earn that respect? Do you think? Because I totally get it's. I'm not sure about the word balance. We might want to come back to that, because I think you have to do both at the same time. Be very challenging, but also be very supportive. Which, by the way, a lot of people. Those are the words that people use about you. It's not been, a bit supportive and a bit challenging. It's been absolutely very, very challenging, but also absolutely very supportive, which I think, the Alex Ferguson example, what I know about him, he managed to do both. And by the way, there'll be some people listening to this who've no idea who Alex Ferguson is, very famous football manager in the UK. But how do you do it? What do you actually do? Because there's
quote. I'll quote someone else, right? I'll quote Epictetus, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
He said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it."
Yeah.
Right. So, if you want a hard-working sales team, you want them at their desk at 7:30 every morning.
Yeah.
Be at your desk at 6:30.
Right. Okay.
Right. If you want if you want a team to work late, you work late, right? If you want a team to get into the office 3-4 days a week, whatever it is, get into the office 3-4 days a week.
Yeah.
Right. Engage with them on sales campaigns early, right? Work with them. There's a brilliant bit in the book of John McMahon's book, qualified sales leader about the QBR.
Okay, yeah.
It's just a brilliant chapter, because as I read it,
Yeah.
I'm like, almost like the hairs in the back of my neck stand up, because I've
Yeah.
been in those situations, right, where you have sales leaders, multiple levels, all marking people's work,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Picking holes.
Yeah.
It is the easiest thing in the world to pick a hole in a deal review,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You haven't got to the economic buyer. You haven't built a champion. You haven't tested this. You don't know who's
Yeah.
budget all. There's always something, right?
Yeah.
A good sales leader will be part of that engagement, right? Will be,
Of course.
coaching through, but offering assistance and help and becoming part of it as well, right? Not just there to grab the glory when we ring the bell and the deal's done, right?
Yes.
So people feel that, people see that. If you prepare people early, if you're my boss, Stephen, and there's a deal review, and I'll say, right, let's run through it. If we've got everything, I'm going to protect you here.
Yeah.
Steve asks a question, I'm going to step in and make sure that, we haven't quite got there yet, but we know it's on our things to do, whatever, right?
Yeah.
That plays through.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things. I'll put a link to McMahon's book in the show notes for this. And also Epictetus, you're clearly a Stoic fan, and people can look at lots of brilliant stuff from him. But I mean, maybe we don't have the time to go into it here, but that whole business of deal reviews and QBRs and just understanding what is the purpose here. It's not for some VP to feel good about, showing off that they can pick a hole in the playing field somewhere. It's actually to improve our chances. Yeah.
Let me give you
help the salesperson.
a top tip, right?
Okay.
Maybe we'll come back and talk about deal reviews, etc.
Okay.
Don't ever call them a deal review.
Okay.
We call them pit stops.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the salesperson is the F1 driver.
Right.
They pull into the pit stop, and we're all there to help. We're there with your tires. We're there with a new steering wheel. We're going to clean your visor. Whatever you want, right? You want a drink of water? We'll give it to you.
Yeah.
We're just to help you. When you look at it that way, this is a pit stop. It changes the whole perspective and the way that works.
That's a brilliant, just nice way of changing the whole emphasis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, you're going to be, sometimes brutally honest with them. If they have blind spots, those blind spots need to be exposed. But it's there to help them to drive that deal forward, drive their car forward faster.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one area I would like to just touch on, Derren, is so you've had a lot of success as a sales leader. You've moved into more general management as well. What's your perspective from the CEO level around sales managers, sales leaders? What should be important to them? Because I think it does change when you have that different perspective, or maybe not.
As a CEO of a, the most important thing is assurance of revenue.
Yeah. Okay.
So, particularly in a smaller organization, I think being a sales leader and being a salesperson, you often miss the significance of decisions that are made based on the revenue that you promise you'll bring in.
Yeah.
So we make strategic decisions in lots of areas based on a forecast.
Yeah.
And that forecast needs to be rock solid, therefore. So it's incredibly important, and it really hits home when you're the CEO, right? Particularly of a smaller company.
Right. Okay, so it's just that focus on this is your primary mission in life and we can talk about lots of other stuff, but actually at the end of the day, it is about bringing in, I mean, orders or revenue, or whatever's important to that business.
It's a critical part of the business.
Yeah.
The more, as I've thought about this, I don't know any company that doesn't, well, every company relies on its sales, right? It's the amount of sales that a company brings in is critical to that organization. So sales is a critical part of the business.
Yeah.
It probably takes more of your time than anything else. In the type of industry that we're in, absolutely. And I want the people to be supported and feel that they can be successful.
Yeah.
And it's about, and also I need people to be honest as well, and not hide bad news.
Yeah.
And I want people to feel that they can come forward at the earliest opportunity and talk about setbacks or challenges or concerns that they have. And let's sit down and work out, how we overcome those.
Right. So I think you've partly answered my next question. So from the CEO's perspective, performance is about bringing in that revenue. But going back to your earlier model, what are the behaviors that you look for in your sales leaders? Clearly, they have to deliver on the numbers, but whether or not they're doing that, what are the behaviors that then you judge them on, and maybe start coaching them on if necessary?
I've been very lucky. I've had some wonderful mentors.
Right.
In different shapes and forms. One of them was a guy called David Callahan at Oracle.
Okay.
And David said to me once, Derren, you need to move from salesman to statesman.
Okay.
And that was as I was moving from first line management to second line management.
Okay.
And it sometimes there's a phrase that just sticks with you, right? And throughout my whole career since then, that's the one phrase that's struck more than anything else.
Right.
So a statesman is more concerned with the good of the whole, than themselves. They are very selfless.
Yeah.
So what's important to everybody, and the harmony and everything working well together, and a team collaborating and being successful.
Yeah.
That's what I look for. I'm not looking for people to be, beating everybody up and waving the stick constantly.
Right.
It's about finding the balance and everybody working together and being comfortable in the environment they're in. That's important. And professionalism, that's the other thing, right? So this is a big thing for me, Steve. The bit that I often present to salespeople and sales leaders and the team, I say, look, you guys are paid more than heart surgeons.
Yeah.
Right? If you Google it, any country in the world, pretty much salespeople, the senior salespeople are paid more than a heart surgeon. And that heart surgeon, Steve, if he's operating on you, you expect him or her to turn up with a clean scalpel.
Yeah.
Right? Fresh, had a good night's sleep, well prepared, know exactly what operation he's going to do. He's prepared himself, and you want him to do it properly, right?
Right.
As a salesperson, you can't turn up having had one too many drinks the night before, half prepared. Let's meet in Starbucks for 15 minutes before and talk about what we're going to do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I expect professionalism in that regard.
Right. So professionalism is one of the words that gets, in my view, abused a lot because, people just associate professionalism with, I don't know, shiny shoes or something.
Yeah.
But I think you've talked around that. It was really interesting. I was going to ask you. So one of the comments I saw about you was that you're both professional and personable, and that's quite difficult for some people to
to get their heads around, because professionally you're prepared, you're totally in control, but at the same time you have a heart and relate to people. And which I guess is where the word empathy comes in as well.
The easiest way to do that is just admit your mistakes.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Say, I'm really sorry, Steve, I shouldn't, I got that wrong, right? I got your target wrong.
Okay.
I understand that now, right? I should never have given you that target.
Right.
I thought that deal would happen. I thought that you would be able, we'd be able to penetrate into that account, whatever it is, right? I got that wrong. People, when you're open in that way,
yeah,
people become more comfortable with you, right? Because you meet your own failings and flaws, and sometimes I can dive in, right? I can be too direct. There's this problem I've got, Steve, is if I'm angry, you can see it, right?
Oh,
People
okay.
say, "Oh, you didn't need to say anything. We could tell by your face, right? Your
Right.
little twitching your top lip, and it's like, well, here he goes. He's going to burst here, right?"
Okay.
And that because I'm serious about a lot of things, right? A lot of things
Yeah.
matter to me. But then the ability to take the time to, sometimes I'll call salespeople up at the end of a quarter.
Yeah.
And I'll say, hey, get back on the horse.
Okay.
Right? It didn't work for you. We were in it together. We both went for that opportunity. Right? We thought it would happen. We lost it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You fell off the horse. You dust yourself off. Get back on and we go again. Right? So let's go again together. And that means a lot to people when they've finished a quarter and they've lost something, or they haven't got what, they did forecast something that didn't happen or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's those little things that can mean a lot.
For sure.
And give people confidence. That's, for me, that's what leadership is, right? Leadership is it's being able to press people when they need, I need more from you. I need to be prepared. I need you to follow process better. Think about this more.
Yeah.
At the same time, we win together, we lose together.
Right. And there is that openness, as you talk about, admitting your mistakes, admitting that, you have emotions.
Yep.
And it always strikes me when we talk about professionalism, sometimes people think that's about suppressing your emotions. And maybe sometimes you want to do that. If you're in front of a customer, you may want to suppress any anger that you have, but at the same time to be open when it's appropriate and let people know that, yeah, I am angry or I'm elated or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Just we touched on it a little bit, but again, a lot of the comments that I get about you and your management style or your leadership style is around how you're able to analyze customer situations, call them deal reviews, or from now on, I'm going to use the word pit stop. But again, how do you approach helping when it gets down to that individual sales opportunity? It sounds like you approach it from a very supportive point of view, which, I get that. This whole thing is about helping you to be more successful. Part of that is you're going to challenge people maybe, but what would be your top tips around how to conduct those kind of reviews?
Let me tell you something. I think the shortest review we ever did was about, I can't remember, it was about 45 seconds.
Okay.
Sales guy turned up.
Yeah.
Wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
Hadn't followed, we gave specific slides that I wanted stuff on. And I said, stop. I've got the head of alliances, the head of pre-sales. I've got VP of sales. I've got my chief operating officer. And I've got the head of consulting here. And you're wasting all of our time because you've not even prepared for this, right? Stop. And he came back and apologized and said, I'm sorry. We ran it again. and he won that deal actually a little while later,
Okay.
right? But that I expect things. What you try and do is you give people structure.
Yeah.
Should never be ambiguity, right? If you're having a pit stop and you're reviewing an opportunity, people should know what is expected. These are the things that we follow.
Yeah.
There's a predictable sales motion is incredibly important. So this is what we're looking for. This is what I expect. And it's much better to give people a template and explain it to them.
Right.
And then, if they've not quite got the template, that's my fault, right? I haven't quite explained it properly.
Sure.
But I get what I want, and hopefully they'll get some things that they want too, and they have some learning from it.
Right. Okay. And it's, to stop a review after 45 seconds when you have all these people involved, that takes, I would call it moral courage. But, it's the right thing to do, but it's very tempting for a lot of sales managers. And clearly, for the podcast, we're thinking mostly about new sales managers. It takes guts to say, hang on, stop, go away, come back when you're properly prepared. Is that something that you had to learn, or how did that come about? It's just natural for you.
It's inherent in that I just feel it was unprofessional to turn up and not prepared, right? And I think had I joined the company and I was brand new and there was I just joined these calls, maybe it would have been different, because I'd have then said at the end, is this the way they all run?
Right. Okay.
Work to do. But no, I've been very clear. There's a sales process, there's a methodology we follow. Yeah. This is what we do. This is why it's important. This is what it will give us. And I want everybody to work towards this, right? And we'll refine things together. And if people aren't following that, it's a real problem. It's incredibly important. I have this phrase, Steve, which is the world's biggest lie. The world's biggest lie is diets don't work, because they do.
Okay.
Every single diet works, right? If you follow it, Steve, whatever it is, you can follow the paleo diet, you can follow the, cabbage soup diet, you can follow high carb, low fat, whatever. If you follow it, it works.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you follow it and then have a Cadbury's Milky Bar, or milk chocolate bar, and you're on a low carb diet, it doesn't work, right? And it's the same with the sales process, right? It works. But the moment that somebody decides they don't want to do that particular bit, it doesn't work.
That's fascinating, because sometimes I get into debates around medic versus Scotsman or nutcases or Miller High. Doesn't matter. It's how you apply it and being rigorous in how you apply it that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's again, I've written that down. Going to shamelessly pinch that from you, Derren. That's a really good thing. Listen, can we just? I've got one big question for you, which we'll do after a short break, about mistakes. But just to summarise where we are so far, what would be your top 2 or 3 tips for a new sales manager? Newly, I don't like to use the word promoted, but new into the role. What words of advice would you give them? What would be your top 2 or 3?
Understand everybody who works for you.
Yeah.
So particularly if it's an international role. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
I often say that if you put a German under pressure, they react very differently to a French person.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So there are intricacies of working with different cultures, different nationalities, but it's the same with people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Understand, you know, what it is that these people are interested in, what makes them tick, how they work, what they're frightened of, what they want to achieve, what their ambitions are.
Yeah.
Number one, once you understand that, you can work with them on what they
Okay.
want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
The second thing is, I would say, be brilliant at something. Whatever it is,
Okay.
be brilliant at it. Everybody can be brilliant at something.
So could you give me some examples?
You can be the first in the office and the last to leave, right?
Okay.
It's like, this guy works harder than everybody else.
Yeah.
This person understands the industry better than
Okay.
everybody else. This person understands the technology better than anybody else.
Right.
My first ever sales job, I set about to understand. I was selling payroll. Understand payroll legislation better than anybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would sit in front of customers and talk about legislative requirements of payroll that my more senior salespeople I was shadowing would look at me and go, where the hell has he pulled that from?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
As a sales leader, right, people are looking for you to be knowledgeable in some way, shape or form, right?
Yeah.
It can be, you can be the best sandler or the best medic guy in the world, right? Whatever it is, be brilliant at something.
Yeah.
That shines through.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
And be a protective layer as well.
Oh, okay.
Make people feel safe because, you're that protective layer between them and anything else.
Yeah, and that one is really interesting because I get a lot of that when we talk about, the actual practicalities of being a sales manager. You don't get that in many of the textbooks, but in reality, particularly in large, complex organizations, there are so much pressures that you as the sales leader have to, provide that air cover for the people who are actually doing the job. That's fantastic, Derren. Thanks a lot for that. Can we take a short break?
Yeah,
and then I'm going to ask you, if you're happy with it, to tell us about your biggest mistake.
No problem.
Bonus question.
So, Derren, I mean, you talked about admitting your mistakes, and we all learn from our mistakes, and hopefully we learn from other people's mistakes. So are you happy to share with us, what was your biggest or one of your biggest mistakes as a sales leader and what you learned from it?
When I became a sales leader, I had a preconceived view of the way that things would work, and how we would be successful.
Okay.
The problem with that is you are dealing with lots of different personalities, and you can't move everybody in the same direction at the same time, at the same pace.
Yeah.
So if you become a sales leader, you need to really look at the landscape, the people, the product, your go-to-market, the prospect, the addressable market, and then define how you lead from that rather than have a preconceived idea of it.
Right.
And subsequent to that, every time I've moved, at least the first 30 days, I'm just trying to understand what we've got.
Right. Okay.
So, and that also plays out in preconceived ideas and notions of the individuals that you will manage as well.
Okay.
So you might think that this person is a problem, another person is a superstar. Don't go with those preconceived ideas, right? understand it yourself,
Right.
by spending time with them and talking to them, and then you'll get a better picture, and you'll be able to put this kind of tapestry together of your organization and your people and where you want to go and build it from there, rather than out of a textbook or just something that you feel is going to work.
Yeah, and again, I come across lots of new sales managers who are, confident in their own abilities, which is good, have some great experience, want to make a difference quickly, but end up with preconceived ideas that they then try and force through, and they're just not right for that situation, that individual. That's really, I think some really good points there for people to think about.
And and with that, I think mistakes I've made is I've thought this, I assume a management role, and there are people that I think I'm going to get rid of, right? This person's not going to make it. I've made that decision before I've really had a chance, or they've had a chance, right?
Yeah.
And I've made those mistakes before.
Yeah. And I don't know if you found this, but often going into a role, I found it as a sales manager, and I knew a lot of sales managers have, those preconceived ideas maybe come from senior leadership. They'll appoint you into a role and say, look, you've got a problem with this person and you can rely on that person. But that's very dangerous, just to take, that very different perspective.
Absolutely. And that is interesting. You should say that's really common. That's really common.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So final question. What are you most proud of achieving in your sales leadership career?
I think you're always proud of the people that worked for you and have gone on to be really successful.
Okay.
That is fabulous. It's a fabulous feeling, right? I often talk about this instance as well, where I was a second line leader at the time, and I'd hired a sales director, and there was a big deal to be done, like a significant, life-changing for some people deal.
Right.
And this was a woman who was my sales director at the time. It was the last day of quarter, and we're in the office, and I said, are you on top of it? And she said, yes. She was negotiating with the procurement people, and I went home. Right? I got an early train home.
Okay.
And then some people said, where is he? Where's he at? He's gone. And my boss at the time said, that's leadership for you. Because I'd left her with confidence from me that she could, do that deal, that big deal, right? And she didn't need my help. And that was a big thing for her and the team. And the deal came in, and I think the champagne was out. And they were like, where is he? And I'm like, well, I'm sat at home, actually. And I've just opened a bottle of wine. But
okay,
it's your guys, it's your deal. You guys did it. There wasn't really much from me that, that I was involved with. And I think they respected that. And it's still something I'm very proud of.
That's an amazing story. And listening to you relate that, it comes back to, I think we've touched on this a couple of times, that as a sales leader, you have to have courage. I mean, that story, I can see how you get a lot of respect for that. That changes the dynamics of everything. But you have to have courage to do that. And in many organizations that, culturally it's frowned upon for the leader to be away at that time. But it just strikes me what you're actually saying is, understand your role and have the courage of your convictions to do it. Minor thing, leaving early, but that would have had a huge impact on the individuals.
Yeah.
Really
And
interesting.
it's a different way of putting pressure on them, right?
Uh,
You can put
yeah,
pressure
yeah.
on them by hanging around them all the time, or you can go home and say, hey, I'm going to let you, it's your rodeo, right? It's your
Yeah,
rodeo.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's like, and what they suddenly do is they want to do it for you, not do it because of you.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you can get
But
people
yeah,
into
yeah.
that frame of mind, you're onto a winner.
Yeah. What an amazing story. What an amazing story. Derren, I'm just going to say thank you ever so much. This time for me has just flown by. I've made lots and lots of notes. And any final words you'd have for potential or new managers coming into the role?
It's a wonderful career, right? It's a wonderful career in lots of ways. You can earn good money. You can have a great time. Outside of being a professional sports person, I'm not sure what else I would have chosen, right? So it can be great.
Yeah. Excellent. Derren, thank you ever so much. I'm sure we're going to get lots of brilliant comments from this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If you're an aspiring new or developing sales manager in complex business to business, or you know of someone who is, you may want to go to www.realsalesmanager.com to learn about our unique blend of training and coaching to help aspiring sales managers to decide if it's right for them and how to go about getting a job, to help new sales managers get as effective as possible, as quickly as possible, and to help developing sales managers with a personalised program to improve specific skills.